Panic in Washington. Is Africa the next global battleground? Hello, I am Dr. Cool. The new development occurring in different African continents create unrest in the West that sounds like a looming of war over African resources. Seems China missed the Tea Party held in Berlin conference, and now China is making moves that is pissing on US flames to use aid, debt to chain Africa. This video footage I will be sharing with you is disturbing and concerning, as it sounds like a war looming silently because China have tested the tree of life that grows abundantly in Africa, and they are not willing to back off. This tree of life that prompted the first fight among Europeans to scramble for African mineral resources, it seems like war is looming and it's about to break out. Or except the second Berlin conference meeting will be held to plan new strategy to cause unrest in Africa. Here's the full story. So, a recent high-profile gathering in Washington has sent shockwaves through US policy circles. One congressman warned bluntly that, and I quote, "China is taking over African nations without a shot fired." His forceful rhetoric really reflects the growing concern within US leadership. African development, which was once a distant concern, has suddenly become the flashpoint of a looming great power contest. Policymakers, think tank analysts, and diplomats convened last week to discuss mounting evidence of China's accelerating reach in Africa. At the heart of the alarm is China's strategic infrastructure deals, from ports and railways to satellite bases, that are locking in decades-long influence. Its deep investments in critical minerals essential to future tech, like cobalt, lithium, and rare earths, position Beijing as a gatekeeper of the global green energy boom. Military training and arms deals, such as the $140 million program to train 6,000 African military personnel, raise fears of dual-use leverage. A senior congressman, echoing historical colonial overtones, declared, "They are literally over-leveraging them, bringing in their workers, extracting natural resources." China's Belt and Road Initiative, often called BRI, extends infrastructure loans in exchange for resource access. Think rail links, hydro projects, power plants. This approach, honestly, is effectively tying nations into China-centric supply chains. At the 2024 Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, Xi Jinping offered billions in loans, grants, military training, and even waived tariffs, without the governance conditions that are often tied to Western aid. China controls around 70% of cobalt and copper production in the DRC and is building battery plants in Morocco, as well as iron ore projects in Guinea. This is really cementing its hold on green tech resources. With a naval base in Djibouti and expanding military partnerships elsewhere, China is carving out security influence, sparking alarm in United States defense circles.
They have to act fast, because looking at what China is doing in Africa, it's becoming a threat to the United States of America, and they really need to do something. These people, ever since we knew them, they have never done anything good for Africa. The roads they claim they built were for them to be able to move all the resources that they were taking from Africa. We saw the educational system they gave to us. Nothing good out of it. In school, these are the same people that the African students or youth are going to compete with on the global stage. And we are busy dancing, learning A for apple, B for ball.
Good afternoon. The hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations, Africa and Global Health Policy Subcommittee will come to order. Welcome to our witness. Thank you all for joining us today. There is a consensus emerging. First, that for decades the United States has been disregarding acute national security challenges and critical opportunities in Africa. And second, that for the safety and prosperity of Americans, we can no longer afford to do so. I believe that consensus is both correct and long overdue. The emphasis and attention that President Trump has already given to Africa is a demonstration of that consensus. Those challenges and opportunities are vast. They include threats posed by China, Russia, and Iran, as well as an array of regional crises. Many of the challenges we face are so fundamental and have been neglected for so long that what needs to be done is relatively clear. We have an enormous amount of work to do. Today's hearing is on China's malign influence in Africa. China represents the most significant long-term strategic threat to the United States. I believe that fundamentally, China is a global threat that must be confronted globally, region by region. Among those regions, pressingly, is Africa. China is exercising its military, economic, and political power and advancing its authoritarian agenda, all while undermining the sovereignty of African nations and the strategic interest of the United States. Politically and diplomatically, China is leveraging its growing influence to marginalize U.S. allies, most notably Taiwan. The Chinese Communist Party is pouring billions into its Belt and Road Initiative, trapping African countries in unsustainable debt and using these arrangements to block American interests. The primary reason why China is investing so heavily in Africa is critical minerals. China already dominates critical mineral global supply chains, and China is aggressively locking up control over these resources across Africa. That leaves the United States vulnerable to being cut off. Xi Jinping talks about, quote, world socialism, and declares that, quote, realizing communism has been the party's supreme ideal and ultimate objective. The CCP is building a military capable of global power projection and creating regional economic blocs that exclude the United States because they intend to project power globally at the expense of core American national security interests. Countering Chinese malign influence in Africa requires us to reshape the paradigm of U.S.-Africa policy. For decades, U.S.-Africa policy has been synonymous with aid and development. Today, we are changing that paradigm. Today and into the future, U.S.-Africa policy will revolve around investment-led commercial diplomacy. To counter China, we need to partner with our allies and friends in Africa to promote, expand, and grow trade and investment relationships. To be an alternative to China, we have to create real alternatives to China.
The International Development Finance Corporation, or DFC, has ramped up activity, deploying $553 million for a Trans-Africa rail corridor and growing a $50 billion portfolio, aimed squarely at countering Chinese infrastructure dominance. Strategic trade agreements are, really in focus right now. Efforts are underway to restart duty-free access under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, and boost two-way trade and investment relationships that have been undercut by both United States aid cuts and, China's advances. When it comes to security and military aid, Washington is actively negotiating training and cooperation deals, like, for example, a $5 million security and democracy package for Gabon, aimed at stemming Chinese military entrenchment. Many fear that this intensifying rivalry kind of echoes those colonial-era scrambles, just, now rebranded as geopolitical competition for minerals and influence. The Washington meeting concluded with a stark warning from one congressman. If we are not competing in Africa, American businesses are not competing, we lose. This language, referencing Africa as a battleground, signals a shift in United States strategy, treating the continent less as a partner and more as a zone of strategic competition. While United States policymakers sound the alarm, many African nations are playing both sides. Governments welcome infrastructure and economic ties, Chinese, American, European Union, seeking investment with minimal political interference. Citizens, especially youth, rate China's influence positively, citing affordable products, tangible projects, and scholarships. Some leaders, like South Africa's Ramaphosa, argue that China's deals aren't debt traps, but mutually beneficial arrangements. But criticism persists. There are concerns about opaque contracts, the heavy debt burdens like Kenya's railway debt, environmental issues, and threats to political agency. It's a complex situation, really. Critical minerals for electric vehicles and renewables are at the heart of this matter. The ties between Africa and China could, determine the supply of these essential resources. Geosecurity is another big one. Whether it's about naval bases or satellite surveillance, the Chinese presence in Africa is definitely affecting the global strategic balance. It's something we can't ignore. Political alignment, with issues like United Nations votes, Taiwan, and Xinjiang, could, really shape global norms as Africa's tilt becomes more pronounced. What began as development cooperation is, honestly, morphing pretty quickly into strategic rivalry. Washington's rhetoric, calling Chinese activities encroachment, just reflects a deepening anxiety that Africa might be the next chessboard in a strategic showdown over resources, influence, and, Western relevance. This isn't simply about investment strategy. It's a geopolitical struggle with some seriously high stakes for the global order. And unless U.S. policy moves beyond just rhetoric to a more sustained partnership, the race for Africa could very well define the next chapter in U.S.-China global competition.